The twine that I like to use for tying brooms is from Secure Line, and it's called tarred drop line, and it's actually a fishing twine. It's number 18. There's about 100 yards, 250 feet on this roll. It'll do a lot of brooms, and the nice thing about this tarred drop line is it doesn't slip. It's not slippery, so that when you tie, and as you tie the broom, the drop line doesn't try to slip backwards, and it's easy to hold tension with your thumb. And I'll explain that as we go, as I start doing the tying. The tarred drop line, I don't put the whole reel. I don't put 250 feet on the tying frame. I'll put about half of it on there. You can certainly put all of it on there, but it kind of likes to get knotted up if you do that. And if you get a twist in it, you'll never get the knot out without cutting it off. So I only put about half, 150 feet of the roll at a time onto the tying frame itself. So the corn has been in the water now for a little while, and I think the first thing I'm going to do for ease of illustration, and here's another thing to remember to do, and that's to pull the basket reed out of the water and flip it upside down, and keep flipping it upside down maybe 2 or 3 more times as you go, to make sure that it's good and wetted before we actually get to the weaving portion. The wetter that is, the better, because we fold the reed over completely, and if it's not thoroughly wetted, the reed will break at that point, and it kind of doesn't look nice. It opens up the fibers, and it just needs to be very, very wet. And that's getting there. We're getting close to being good for the fold over on the reed. So the first thing I'm going to do is to tie a small besom, a hearth besom, and this is an apple stem. I always trim my apple trees around on February 2nd if I possibly can. I like Groundhog Day. That's in the old Wheel of the Year calendar. That's a pretty important day. It's the day that animals can speak to us if you have the ears to listen. And the cultural memory of that fact from the old calendar is what we commonly call Groundhog Day, which I think is pretty funny that hole over is still there. So the hearth besom is I don't know, 18 inches long, maybe 2 foot long for the handle. It's just meant for basically as a whisk that you use to clean off the hearth from around the surface of the hearth for the ashes from the fire. I drilled 2 holes in the handle, and one hole is towards the top within about 1 inch, and we're going to put a lanyard in there when we're done. A leather cord always looks nice, so that you can hang that up from a hook. And then I will usually about 1 inch or 2 inches from the end of the part that we tie on, I will taper a couple of inches down. It certainly doesn't need to be a point. And if it's a point, that's very easy to break. So I just do a gentle taper, about like a violin peg, and leave the end. And then up about 1 inch, drill a hole. And that hole is where we gain the mechanical advantage of the tying to put the broom together. So I'm going to take the twine from the tying frame, and I'm going to put it through the hole that I drilled in the taper. I'm going to put a couple of wraps on this, and I'm just going to put a simple overhand knot in here. That will bind very well. It won't come undone. And as we hold and gradually bind the broom corn, the strength of that knot will give us our mechanical advantage. That's anytime you hear somebody tying the brooms with a traditional tying frame, there's always a musical sound going on, and as you The reason you leave the flats on the tying frame is that with your feet, it's easy to hold the tying frame in place, and then whenever you need a little bit more twine to keep from ending up all the way down by the tying frame and bending over all the time, you just let up a little bit of pressure on your feet and then pull a little bit more twine off the tying frame. The Hearth Besom requires a lot less broom carn than a full-size broom. Usually something quite a bit less than what can fit between your thumb and forefinger. And the secret of getting the handle of the besom in the very center of the broom carn is something that just comes with practice. So what I like to do is I like to fold the broom carn. You can't just stick the handle in the end, because you've got the tying twine already tied to the taper of the handle. So we're going to basically wrap the broom carn about an inch past where the taper is cut. So we put 2 inches of taper on the end of the handle, and then about an inch past that, we're going to wrap the broom carn around the handle. And we're going to fold it over. And just kind of twist it around. And you're going to look at the end to determine whether or not it appears that there's about an even amount of broom carn all the way around. It doesn't have to be flat. We're going to trim a lot of this off. We're going to actually end up trimming back to very close at the end of the process. We'll have this trimmed very closely back to about where the taper is. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to put 3 wraps on. To start, I'm going to roll the broom towards me, and the twine is coming off the top or the front of the broom maker's tying frame. And I'm holding pressure on the twine. This twine is very, very strong, and I haven't seen anybody break it yet. And we're going to put that in there just a little bit further, because I like to have about 2 full inches of weaving, basket weaving, 2 to 2.5 inches, maybe 3 inches of basket weaving. And I've gotten off now a little bit, so I'm gonna wrap my broom carn a little bit better around there, and I'm gonna put a full wrap on, and I'm going to check my balance for what the broom is going to look like when it's bound. Because once you put this first wrap on, you've set the pattern for how the broom carn is going to be attached to the handle. So remember 3s. We're going to talk about a lot of 3s in our wrapping. So we're going to wrap 3 layers of twine to start the broom. And that's 3. And then we're going to run a spiral up towards the end of the handle, up about 2 inches, and then we're going to put 3 wraps on again. And then 3 wraps go on at the top. And at this point, if you chose to simply bind the broom off, which is going to be the last step that we do after the basket material is on the broom, we've got a nicely balanced amount of broom corn all the way around the handle. We've got it completely bound, and if we bound that off right now, that would be a perfectly acceptable broom. Nothing wrong with it, and it would perform all of its functions. From this point forward, with this binding in this condition, the rest of what we do is strictly decorative. I think that tools should have style, no matter what kind of tool they are, and that's the reason that I use the basket reed for the binding, because at the end of the process it makes a very, very attractive broom with characteristics of basket weaving that I think is aesthetically very pleasing. But mechanically, this broom is done, other than doing the binding. So we're going to make a spiral. We're going to go back to where we started with another spiral in the other direction. We're maintaining a lot of tension on this binding twine as we go. And the next thing I'm going to do is put 3 more wraps in where we started. And now we're ready for our basket reed. The next step in laying the fiber that we're going to use for our weaving, which is a basket reed material, is to lay the reed under the tying twine above where we're holding pressure. And we're going to lay that reed in the direction that's opposite of what you would think that you would do. So the first piece I put in there, I'm going to lay with the long end of the reed about 1 inch underneath the binding. The binding is coming over the top of the broom. I'm wrapping towards me. The binding is also coming off the front edge of the tying frame, and that allows me to very carefully and easily hold pressure on this with just pulling back towards my body. You'll notice I keep the besom handle against my leg, and that helps me keep this steady, because this part of the process can be a little daunting the first time that you do it. I like to have the tying twine that holds the initial line of basket reed right in front of all the binding that we've done. So we're still going to be working our way towards the top of the broom a little bit, towards the base of the broom. This is the top of the broom. And this reed, as we stick these in here, we're not going to get too concerned about being real tight with this yet. You leave about 1 inch stick down that's going to go underneath the weaving. And you can count as you go, or you can count them when you're done. I'm going to count as I go. This is 3. That's 4. And what you'll find with the reed is that usually you can get them spaced so that you can end up with an odd number. The odd number certainly is the easiest way to go in doing the weaving. It makes for a very consistent basket-like appearance. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Now it's a little short. That's 6. So if we end up with an even number, we can kind of space them out to where we can either add 1 or take 1 out and come up with the right number that we want. That's 7. And again, I'm not wrapping this real tight yet. I'm just holding them in place. So that's 8. There's 9. There's 10. There's 11. There's 12. There's 13. So this becomes what I like to call the perfect broom. So this broom will have 13 bindings, and the idea in the wheel of the year is that the 13 bindings on the broom represent the lunar calendar are one full moon, 13 full moons in a year, and the bindings represent, one of those represents each moon. So now I am putting a lot of pressure on the reed. And remember, 3s, we're going to wrap this, we're going to put a 3rd wrap on this all the way around. And then we're going to stop. And at the 3rd wrap now this portion is a little bit more challenging. So the next step, and I'm going to hold the handle again against the inside of my knee, and I'm going to begin to lay the reed over on itself, and I'm holding the reed in the 3 wraps that have come over the top of these pieces of basket reed. I'm holding my thumb on that, and that holds that in place where it won't slip. Remember, this cordage is a very sticky nature. And the next thing I'm going to do is fold all of these reeds down and go over the top of all of them. And once I've got them all folded over with 1 wrap, then again we're going to go around 3 wraps. And you want to hold a pretty good pressure on this to keep them from slipping. And you want to keep them pretty straight, because remember, we're going to be weaving these. And my reed is acted real nice. It's not breaking at the fold. So this is going to make a real pretty little broom. A lot of traditional tyers that do brooms don't like this basket material use, and what I like to say is, when I teach classes, that I'm teaching a way to do things, not the way. And I'm always suspicious when somebody teaches the way to do any traditional craft, because every traditional craft was practiced by folk artists who weren't folk artists. They were making utilitarian items for their times, and everybody had a different way of doing things, because it was mostly all oral tradition, and somebody learned from somebody else, and the variations that are out there were as much about skill as they were about style. And the benefit that we've got is that you can take classes from different people and pick the things that you like and do your own thing, because there aren't any guilds that will hold you accountable for certain practices or certain prices. I get $19 for my hearth besoms, and that's what I regard as a fair exchange for the amount of time and work that it takes to do these, and here's the last one. And now remember, I just slipped off of my reed. It's very easy to slip off of there at this point. So now we're at the piece that everybody's going to see. So carefully arrange your reed by hand. And I like to make sure that my 3 wraps at this point don't cross each other. And it might be kind of hard to see on this little camera, but the 3 wraps are going to lay against each other. 3 wraps down. There's the 3rd. And at the point where we come around, where we've come out from underneath, is where we start weaving. And we weave just like a basket, and we weave over one and then under one. And to keep the weaving as tight as possible, so there's over one, under one, over one, under one. I like to pull the broom towards the tight 3 wraps as I go, and that keeps the basket weaving as tight as possible. So we've just gone over one, go under one. Again, I'm going to pull this twine tightly up towards our 3 wraps, because I like that weaving to be as tight as I can possibly get it, and it makes it look really, really nice. Over one and under one. And they will stick out a little bit as you get started, but when you come around for the second time and actually start doing the real weaving, then everything tightens up at that point and lays down real nice. So if you've got an odd number and you've come around, then your binding will start to look like a basket.